The following presentation is brought to you by kmmedia.pro. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information. Now stay right where you are as we present. Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas, one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. And welcome everybody to a Monday morning version of Positive Talk Radio. Thank you for being here. We've got a great show for you today, so hopefully you will stay for the entire time. But first, I have a quandary for Benny. Benny, have you got your Christmas shopping done?
No. Oh, wait. No, I take that back. I've gotten one thing, because it was like, you know, when something pops in your head, and you're like, you might as well just buy it now, because you'll probably forget it later. I do have one gift that I have purchased, and that was in June.
Oh, very nice, because you were planning ahead, something that I do not ever do.
Yeah, or my brain's just not going to remember it after a while. It's like, just might as well do it now.
Well, you know, it's because I got an email today that said, in preparation for Christmas, it's like, what? It's September still. And
but we're going into fall. So
I guess.
That's how they do it. That's how they
But the older I get, the faster these years go.
Oh, boy, here it comes.
Are you
just the way you said it, you know, get off my lawn. You know, that's the next thing to come out of your mouth.
Get off my lawn and quit moving so fast.
Right.
So in any event, we have Kim Nishida here.
Yeah.
Kim, give me your last name, because it's early morning Monday for me.
It's too early, as if you ask me. My last name is Nishida.
Nishida, and you have a website, and I want to reference everybody to the website, which is kimnishida.com, and that's NISHIDA.com, and you can go there. She really is a remarkable human being, and we talked the other day, and we get to talk again today, and it really, and then that's on positivetalkradio.net, by the way, if you want to go there and listen to that interview. But Kim she has a.
Oh, Kevin, did we lose you? Say that one more time there, buddy. You blanked out.
Hello.
There, we got your back.
Go away?
Yeah.
What happened to me?
I got your back. It's okay.
Okay. Well, you caught me. Thank you, Benny, for catching me. I appreciate that.
Oh, my little baby.
Well, I'd break your arms.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh my gosh!
So where did we leave off? Did we leave off with the introduction of that Kim is the founder of As the Crow Flies Intuitive Arts, where we believe that you are worthy of your deepest dreams and desires. So I'm all good. I'm all caught up. Good, Kim. Welcome to the show. How are you this Monday morning?
I am doing just dandy. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I tell you, you are a very gifted individual. You help people learn about their stories and learn about how they can improve their lives just a little bit, or in some cases, a whole lot. And so that it really is interesting to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be in this vibe. I appreciate what you do, Kevin, this platform you bring to people to have these conversations. I mean, we need a lot more of this. So thanks for doing this.
We do indeed, because there is a. Well, let me ask you, how do you feel? How do you feel things are going around the world at the moment?
A lot of stuff is stirred up, right? That's kind of how I see it. Things are stirred up, and it's a good thing. Like, I know it feels uncomfortable, and we don't like a lot of times dealing with change or confrontation. And that's been me in my whole life. Like, I shied away from confrontation. I would do anything to avoid it, was definitely a people pleaser for so many reasons. And so stirring things up was definitely not something I ever wanted to do. And the world is stirred up very much so, and everyone's feeling it. And that's why I think there's just a lot of friction, I would say, happening between people. Yeah, that might be a nice way to say it.
That is a good way to say it. Indeed. So There are people who will tell me when I'm doing, in the course of doing the show and elsewhere, they'll tell me that this is an important part of our growth process. Do you kind of agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. I don't think we can just be in a state of being born into like a perfect state of being. That's the human experience. We're here to actually grow and evolve, and we're here to experience different things. So that growth is a beautiful thing. Going through change is a beautiful thing. And you've probably seen it in your own life, like a certain period of time when you're younger and things happen and you grow through this thing. And it's like, wow, I'm so glad I had that experience. And so it's definitely a time, and you can feel it around the world. This is kind of feels different maybe now. And I could be naive, and maybe people said the same thing like 50, 100, 200 years ago. It feels different this time, but it feels different. And I feel like we're rising up in this, people talk about this higher level of consciousness and Eckhart Tolle and New Earth, all that stuff.
I don't think that they were talking about this 100 years ago, because nobody was. I think our evolution of ourselves has evolved us to a point where we can not only go through some of these things, but we can recognize that these things are actually happening, rather than saying, oh, woe is me, why would anyone allow this to happen to me?
Well, I think it definitely wasn't mainstream. I think there were cultures where these conversations were happening, but yeah, for sure, not in the mainstream. I mean, if you look back over time, the different culture does such funny things, right? The way society teaches us how to be, from when we're very young, whether it's our parents or it's your upbringing, your culture, your heritage, all these things. And so there are definitely times, even very recently, gosh, to me, it feels like even 10 years ago, we couldn't have been in the state we're in right now. Like the conversations, the change that's happening could not have really happened. So I don't know. It's a very interesting time, I would say, for sure.
It is indeed, because in 2003, when I did Positive Talk originally, there was a lot of people that said, what is he talking about? I don't understand a thing he's saying, because that's just weird stuff. But now it's becoming a lot more mainstream. We can actually talk about the things that you do to help people understand a little bit more about their lives and about their soul and about how it all works. You can help them understand that a lot better. Whereas, 20 years ago, it was a completely different, let me take you back to what do you call it? The Wayback Machine. Back 20 years, we were starting the Iraq War. There was a lot of negativity back then, but that was really mainstream because everybody was all excited about going to fight the Iraq War, which turned out to be not such a really good idea, and stuff. So nowadays, I think people are more aware. Has that been your experience?
Well, I remember you and I had this conversation. I think when we first met, I remember you said you started the show in 2003, and that's when I became a certified coach. And back then it was like a life coach, right? And no one had ever heard of a life coach. It was just starting out. The coaching industry was just starting out in the early 2000s. And so for me, if I was going out and telling people and they'd say, what do you do? And I'm like, if I said a coach or even a life coach, they would scratch their heads. You're like, well, you coach soccer? What do you do? Like people didn't have a framework for that. So having that conversation, it was a big deal to talk about, oh, well, no, I hold the space for people to, recognize who they are. And it just was a foreign language at the time. And so I do agree with you that the conversations I was having back then to even explain who I was and what I did is very different than now. It's so much like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it. I've had 3 life coaches already. So I totally know what you do. Yeah, it's very different. It's changed quite rapidly, I would say.
Well, even using the term holding the space for someone was one, if you said that back then, they were like, I don't know what that means. Holding what space would you be talking about? And I don't know why I do that, but whenever I talk about somebody that doesn't understand something, maybe it was because I worked in the South for a while, but I always put on a Southern accent, which I suppose would be a little demeaning to somebody. But I apologize if I if I've hurt your feelings at all. But holding the space for somebody is really important in the coaching work that you do.
It's something I remember when I was first starting out and getting trained, and like listening is a skill, right? Listening is a skill, especially deep listening. And as I started doing the work with clients, and I realized, people would start to cry because nobody had ever done that for them before. Nobody had actually taken the time to sit there and actually be present for them and listen. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that just doing that was going to be so profound. But for so many people, it was. And that's when I started to realize, well, we need a whole lot more of this,
It's interesting because there's a show host in town. He does a morning show on a rock and roll station. He years ago was in the Partridge Family, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
That. Yep. And he has a show, and he was talking to a lawyer, and the lawyer comes on. It's a sponsored segment. He comes on like once a week, and they were talking to clients. People would call in about the divorce or different things, and the lawyer said to one of these people that called in because she was having trouble with her husband and or soon to be ex-husband and stuff, and she said, "Well, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason."
Yeah.
And the host popped up and said, I've never heard that one before. What does that mean? And the lawyer said, I know you've never heard that before because you don't follow that subscription of listening before you talk. You just talk and then you don't listen to what it is. So listening is a huge skill, and a lot of people still don't recognize it or have it. How do you coach people to develop that skill?
I think what I do personally with people is give them permission to do that for themselves, actually. So I think a lot of times they're not honoring themselves. It's like holding the space. They're not giving themselves permission to let themselves have a voice. I don't know, maybe that sounds funny. They're always looking outwardly, externally, for what people expect of them. Okay, so I'm projecting a lot. This is my experience. I grew up, again, like I said, as a people pleaser. I grew up as a very fearful person. You wouldn't have known it. You never would have known I was fearful. I looked super confident on the outside all the time, but I was always constantly trying to figure out what others wanted me to be or who they wanted me to be or what I needed to do so that I wouldn't have that confrontation or they wouldn't get upset with me or whatever. And this is all my own construct in my own mind. I made this all up, but I found that's not a very uncommon story, especially for women, to grow up that way. So I was not listening or honoring my own intuition. I didn't even think I had an intuition, to be honest. And so I think that's, to me, is the first step for a lot of people, is really listening to themselves versus who they think they are. So that's where the stories come in, because we have this notion of who we are and our identity, but a lot of that is coded in stories that other people have given us, or stories that are old that no longer fit us or serve us. And so it's kind of getting down to, who am I really? And can I listen to myself and honor myself without having to perform for others? I think that in of itself is a first step that's very liberating and freeing, and can be a little terrifying, actually, to be that person, but it's so empowering. And then once you get to that place, then you can start holding, because what I find is, if you're a people pleaser, you're more than happy to hold space for others. You're not going to hold space for yourself. So you'll be like, what can I give you? How can I serve you? What can I do? But it's not that it's a dishonest thing. It's more like it's a self-preservation thing, if that makes sense. So there are a lot of people who are out there and good listeners, but almost not from a fully present way, almost from a, how can I keep from getting squashed way? I said a lot there. I don't know.
No, you sounded very intelligent, very wonderful. As a matter of fact, I know exactly what you're talking about, because that happens to me all the time, because I also am a people pleaser. I'm interested in, I will take on anybody's stuff. If you got a problem, you come to me, baby, I'll help you with it and we'll figure it out. But if somebody says to me, let me help you with your stuff, then I start stammering around going, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't need any, and because it's much more comfortable for me to be in a position of, it's not even strength, but a position of just being there and listening to other folks. But when they ask me, You seem a little sad today. Why are you sad today? I don't know. So it's important for someone like me to work with someone like you who can help me understand that I'm just as valuable as anybody else.
Right. Exactly. And that's hard. That can be a hard, almost painful thing to do. Like, a lot of times asking for help can be super, like you said, it can be super hard, if not impossible. And then there's a lot of spiraling that goes on. You start to feel guilty or whatever about asking for help. And yeah, it's crazy.
It's to me, it's like when I was a kid, it was like, you don't need to be a self-centered person. You need to take care of other people, because if you're thinking about yourself and thinking, then you're selfish. You're self-centered, and that's just terrible to be. And so I grew up with that philosophy of being, don't be self-centered.
Yeah, no, you and me both. We're like twins separated at birth. That was me as well. I thought that was like the biggest sin you could ever have, was like to be selfish, or be even the center of attention. For me, like being the center of attention was kind of, I don't know, it was seen as kind of rude, or selfish. I guess the word was always kind of selfish, and you didn't want to be selfish. So that was me as well.
The interesting thing about my experience has been that I could be the center of attention as long as I was somebody else. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yes. I'm familiar with that one as well. Yeah.
Because I could be the center of attention if I was acting in a play, or I was the cub master and I had a job to do in front of a bunch of people. I have absolutely no problem with that. But if you were to ask me to come on stage and be myself, that's a wholly different thing.
Right. No, I totally hear you on that one. But I think this is kind of comes back full circle to the friction and everything being stirred up, because I think that's what's being asked of us now, is we need to step up and be ourselves instead of hiding behind. And it's not even like, when I say hiding behind, I count myself in there. Of course, I was hiding behind a lot of stories for my whole life, pretty much. But we need to start rising up and expressing what we truly think. Instead of looking to others. This is kind of scary, but instead of looking to others to say, well, what should I think? What should I do? It's like, no, the answer is actually inside. And that's something that we were taught in coaching. I remember it's like, don't give them the answer. Like, as coaches, you don't give them the answer. Like, they have the answer inside, and how can you bring that out of them? And I think that's kind of that conversation that started 20 years ago. And now we're landing up here. It's like, we all need to be ourselves. And you're seeing so much happening with more self-acceptance being out there, talked about in the media, talking about mental health, all these different things. It's like, we need to be okay with who we are,
That is in and of itself, for a lot of us, a very difficult concept.
Yeah.
Because what if you're not Kim? What if I'm myself and you don't like me anymore?
Yeah. And look at social media. I mean, social media is the playground of like, give me approval. And if you're not getting enough likes, then it's rejection. It's just, and so social media, like if you go on TikTok, the whole game there is we want people to like us. Right. And so what can I do, especially if I'm not being myself, what can I do to get those likes? Because I'm afraid that being just myself isn't enough. So it's hard. I mean, it's hard. I can't imagine growing up now with social media now the way it is.
Oh, I know. I looked at TikTok one time and I figured I can't be on it because I don't wear a bikini well.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. And so to be growing up in this era and having to contend with that, I think it's a whole nother set of rules. Like you and I, we just had the playground rules, right? We didn't then have all these other layers of all these other potential people who could either love us or reject us. And that's kind of what we see. They're either going to love me or they're going to hate me. We don't kind of see that middle ground. So,
And it makes it really hard. And social media is taken over to such extent. Did you know that there is, and I don't know if you follow the news very much, but in Iran that there is some protests going on because a 22-year-old girl was killed by the police. What do they call it? Benny, you know what I'm talking about?
The police? What?
Yeah, they call them the garment police, or not no, it's
fashion
like
police.
It's what?
The fashion police?
No, it's a
garment.
police force that uses see, she was arrested for wearing a scarf but not having all of her hair covered in the scarf. And there's a segment of the police force there that utilizes that. And I forget what you call it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You can look it up. You can Google it. Benny's doing that for me right now. And you might be able to find it. But anyway, she was 22 years old. She didn't have all of her hair underneath her scarf. And so she was arrested, and subsequently she died in custody. And so now there's a great big protests that are going on in Iran. And you know what the first thing that they wanted to do? Shut down the internet.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Because that's where a lot of people get their information when it's not publicly available. They can go on the internet in kind of the underground, and then they can communicate that way and stuff. And so the internet in our day, in 20 years, 30, 40 years ago, none of that would have happened. So it wasn't even available. So it's changed everything really dramatically, and it really changes how we look at ourselves. And you're right, if we don't get enough likes, if we don't have enough of this, then it affects our self-esteem. Even
it affects our self-esteem. It can, you know what I feel like it does really is it validates how we already think about ourselves. In a way. I think a lot of times we already think we're not great, like we already believe that we don't measure up. And so we go to social media and like, there's the proof. See, there's the proof. It's everything I always feared. I'm not universally loved. And so we use that as proof. And that's what our ego does. Our ego is looking for proof. Our ego wants to prove to us. Our ego wants to keep us in our comfort zone, right? That's really kind of its job. Like it wants to keep us safe. And if we step out of that comfort zone or what's known, that can be very dangerous. To our well-being. So our ego says, so it's like, hey, you know what? I see Kevin wants to step out of that comfort zone. He wants to have this huge radio show. And that, what is he thinking? Like we might get our, people might not like us. People might hate us. And so we don't want him to do that. So I don't know how it was for you when you first started your show. Were you pretty excited to do it?
Oh, I was ecstatic to do it. Unfortunately, nobody else was. It was like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And I said, because I feel it in my bones that this is what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And it turned out that this is exactly what I should be doing. But over the course of time, every person, and we should talk about this, every person that looked at me and said, what are you doing? Including the person I lived with, they're all gone now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, see that phrase you said, though, you felt it in your bones. So it's almost like I feel it in my bones. It's almost like saying, I don't have a logical, rational explanation, but it's something I feel. And it's hard for people to accept that, right? Because it seems unsafe. We're like, well, that's just crazy. You're crazy. You can't just go by you feel it in your bones. What the hell is that? So I think that in it of itself, the fact that you did that takes great courage. And there's a point where, I don't know, almost everyone has probably had this in their lives where you've come to this crossroads of, I feel something in my bones. I feel this is something I should do. There's no logical reason for it. It seems very scary. And I can do one of two things. I can either follow that, or I can just say, you know what, I'm just going to pull back and not do that thing that everyone is telling me is crazy. And the courageous thing is to do what you did. And I think what often happens is we don't do the crazy thing. And we kind of remember, like, what if we had done that? There's some regret, or we justify. Oh, remember when I had that crazy idea? I'm sure glad I didn't do that. You know what I mean? So we justify it a lot of times. So it doesn't feel painful of like, oh, I should have done that. Or it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. Like if you hadn't done it in 2003, I bet it would have kept nagging at you. It probably would have popped up in some other form. And then eventually you would have done it. And then the only regret you would have had was, and you hear this from people a lot, I wish I would have done it a long time ago. I wish I would have done it sooner. So that whole thing of following what you feel in your bones is a courageous thing. No one, a lot of times, will understand it. And then when you said those people who said it was crazy that they're not in your life anymore, that's very common. And that's another scary thing. That's why people don't do it, because they're like, I don't want to lose the people in my life. But it's kind of like the next stage of evolution in a way, as we're moving on in our lives. People come and people go. And
you know how I knew that I was on the right path and I was doing the right thing is that as I got into the show and I got to meet some extraordinary people. I got to meet Neil Donald Walsh and Gary Zukav and Greg Braden and all John Edward, all kinds of really, really cool, interesting people. But the most impactful moment of my entire career was the last day that I did the show on KKNW. I won't go into the reasons why it was the last day, but it just happened to be the last day. And when I announced it, and there may be somebody in our audience who was there and remembers that show. If you were, I'd love for you to give us a call and to tell me about your experience of that day. And you could do that by Benny. How can they do that?
425-373-5527 or 888-298-5569.
And so when I announced that the show was going off the air, the phone lines filled up. And people started calling in. One lady said, I'm sitting here looking at a pile of books that I bought because of your show. Mm-hmm. And then another lady said, my health has improved so much because, Benny, remember Jerry Armour?
Vaguely, but yes.
He was our naturopath,
Oh, yes. Naturopath, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he had a vitamin store, and so people would go down to his vitamin store, and they would buy stuff to make them well. And the lady called in and said, "I just want you to know that my health is so much better since I've been going to see Jerry and stuff." But the most impactful one was a lady called in and said, "I just want you to know I'm from Bay Bridge Island, and if she's listening today, I'd love for her to call in. I'm from Bay Bridge Island, and we listen to your show every day." And I said, well, gee, that's awfully nice of you. And she said, no, you don't understand. I am a Alzheimer's caregiver, and she and I listen to your show every day because you still get through to her. Whenever you laugh, she says, there he goes again. and it taught me that we all have an impact on other people in our lives. We don't know how or when or how that's going to play out, but we all are interconnected and we all belong to each other. And so when I was able to have that kind of an impact, that kind of a moment of somebody who, and this was 20 years ago, so I'm sure she's passed on now, the Alzheimer's caregiver patient, and the other gal I don't know, but that we all have that ability to have that impact on somebody's life or many people's lives, depending on what we do. And so why don't more of us take that bull by the horn, as it were, and make it happen for ourselves?
Wow, that is a beautiful, beautiful story. I hope that woman does call in. I would so love to hear that connection. But I think, again, it's just because it seems crazy and like following your intuition. Like, I think intuition's a term that's it's definitely more acceptable nowadays.
Yep.
But before it was just kind of, downplayed or laughed off, or it wasn't real. That we may say like, hey, you might have a gut feeling about something. Like that was a very manly thing to say. I'm gonna listen to your gut, And now there's all this science coming out about, the intelligence of your stomach actually, and your heart and all these different organs. But it's like, I think it's what we talked about earlier. We're afraid of that rejection, or afraid of getting hurt, or afraid of losing people. There's so many things. There's a lot of, I think there was a period in my time where I realized it was quite eye-opening to me that I'd made pretty much every major decision in my life based on fear. Like, the decision, the way I actually went was always a fear-based thing. And it wasn't the courageous thing. And I think I must have been, how old was I? I was in my 40s for sure when I had that realization. It's like, wow, that's maybe not a great way to live your life. Maybe not a great way to live your life. And maybe I don't want to do that anymore.
You don't look like you're in your 40s now.
Oh, no, we talked about this the other day, didn't we? I think I even like said what year I was born. I'm 56 right now. So
You've held up well.
well, thank you. Thank you so much.
I can say that. So, by the way, we're talking with Kim Nishida, and she is a what we would call a soul direction coach, and she's an intuitive coach, and she can help you with to understand why you're really here. Because Kim, when I did that, when I made that decision to do the radio and that whole thing, how it played out, it all started with two questions. One was, why am I really here? And is this all there is? Do you have people asking you those questions when they come to see you?
Yeah. Well, why am I really here? I think that's something we all feel at our core. And it's great. And I think it's happening faster, Kevin, actually, for younger people, that they're getting more in touch with why they're here sooner. And it's not, to me, I always call it's a forgetting. Like when we come into this world, we forget, like we actually know who we are and our purpose, and we forget. So it's this journey back to remembering. And I feel like younger people now are starting to remember faster.
I agree.
It's very exciting. And so I think the whole forgetting part is the hard part, because then we start getting hardwired into who we are, who we quote unquote are, our identity. And there's so many things that we take on from others. And so people start to feel, what's the word that we've said a lot is unfulfilled, right? I feel like I've got everything I always wanted. I got like the house, the kids, whatever it was that they're in their idealized mind. They said, this is what you need to have to be successful, but they still feel empty inside. And so it's hard. You feel like, God, I worked so hard. Or even if you didn't get the things, there's this something happening that it feels like this isn't right. Like they don't feel in their bones that they're on the right path like you did. And so they're trying to find that thing.
Well, and when I was growing up, the getting married, the 2 kids, the picket fence, the dog, the house, the good career, that was all expectation. That was all like, well, what are you going to do when you grow up, and you're going to, go to school, and then you're going to get done with school, and then you're going to go on this path. But that was all somebody else's expectation. That was not my expectation for myself.
So if you knew that was expected of you from others, but you always knew that for yourself, that wasn't the path you wanted to take, or?
Yeah, well, when I was 23, I was guided, and I do mean guided, to go to Green River Community College and join their acting department. And I played in several shows, several plays, and did really, really quite well. I was the lead in Taming of the Shrew, which is Shakespeare, for heaven's sakes. And so I did really well at that. And that's really what was in my heart. That's what I wanted to do, was to become an actor, or to become in the arts in some manner or form. And instead, I found this girl, and the rest is, history. But then when I got to a certain point, that wasn't enough anymore. I needed to fulfill what I felt was in my heart, what was my destiny, if you will.
Right. So that's interesting, though. So what ended up happening there? So if your family had certain expectations for you, right, and you were aware of those expectations, so this is what happens. Like, if it's not like our immediate family, it's more society or teachers. There's a lot that we get told, like, this is what life is like. This is what success means. And I think a lot of us just take it. We take it in. If you're, again, for people pleasers, we're like, okay, we want to know the rules. Tell us what we need to do in order to be successful, and we're going to follow those rules. We're good with that. And then there are some others who are good with saying, or, well, I don't know if it's a good thing. It is good for them. I wish I would have been more like this. They hear what those expectations are. They're like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, if you expect that of me, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do the opposite. Right. So it sounded like you were more like, okay, well, I hear that these are the expectations, but here's what I feel. And I think that's what most people, where they deviated from you because they either didn't even take the time to feel, or if they felt it, they just shoved it down. And that's what I hear a lot of, is that people did a lot of shoving down when they were younger, to the point where then they felt like they couldn't there's no word for unshove, right? You can't like reverse the shoving. They couldn't open that back up. And so now as they're adults and they're at a certain point in their lives, they feel like they can't access that anymore. And there's a feeling like they want to, but they don't know how. So that's kind of what I hear a lot from people. It sounds like you always had that connection though. And that's cool that you did start to go in that direction of the arts and everything. And so did you come back around to that then? I love that you're doing this show. It kind of feels to me, it's kind of the same vein.
It very much is. But it took me till I was in my early 40s, because I got the house. I got the pretty girl. I had a couple of kids. I had the dog, several dogs actually, and so I had stuff. I had means. I was the general manager of a restaurant. I was a national food service manager of an entire country, and stuff like that. So I had all of that, and it wasn't who I really am. And there was a point in time when I recognized that that's not who I really am. And then the universe, and there are people who don't subscribe to my belief structure, which is the universe will guide you if you just let it go and tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And it will take you there. And over a period, this has happened every time, over a period of time, the universe will instruct me to where I need to go, and where I want myself to go, what my soul wants me to do, which is what I want to talk to you about next, because I think that's really important, that you be open enough to let your soul take it, for you to be open to the soul work that you want to do. And so it just naturally evolved into it. Now, at any point, I could have said, I don't think so. I'm scared of that because it might turn out like a bad country music song. And, I'm just really scared of having those things go on, and to lose my friends, to lose my status, to lose all of that, because I want to do something that's way out of the box. Nobody does what I do.
Right. Well, and also the thing you hit on too is like, if you're following your soul, for people like you and me who were taught that might sound kind of selfic.
Very much so.
Selfish, right? So, how dare you? Who are you to like do something, follow your soul? Like, like people really get, and I think people get that pushes people's buttons, because I think at the end of the day, maybe they're not conscious of it, but I think it's because they're afraid to do it for themselves. So how dare you be the one that go and follow your dreams, when I'm living this soul crushing life. Again, it's probably not conscious. They're probably not consciously thinking that, but here I am living this life that I feel wildly unfulfilled, but I feel like I'm trapped in it. And you're not going to be the one to break free. And that's going to make me feel bad about myself. So, yeah.
Funny story. When I was, after I quit the food service company and had gone into the radio business and doing this, there was a guy I went to a banquet, and one of the guys from work was there, and he had too much to drink already, and so he comes up to me and he says, I gotta tell you, I'm so proud of you that you would do that. I wish I had the guts to do that. I hate my job. And it was like, oh, that poor man. I hope he sobered up. But it's just one of those things that there are people that are willing to do that. At what cost, I had no idea. And it turned out to cost me a lot. But it turned out fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, it would have kept coming back around if you had not listened to it. Like you said, I like that you say that it's very nice that the universe guides you. I love that. I agree with you. Although I feel like sometimes in my life, it hasn't been guiding so much as like hammering me over the head. Like the guiding feels so nice and gentle versus like, the universe has given me messages. And if you ignore, like the times I've ignored them, it hasn't gone well. Right. Like, it's like, I heard it and I'm choosing to ignore it. And then it's just like something bad always happened. But I agree. So yes, being open and listening and like following it is a good idea. I think also that whole thing with having that fear and then following your soul, like going for it. We talked earlier about social media and how that can be validating for how someone might feel about themselves. And also at the same time, I'm seeing in social media a lot of inspiring stories of people who are going for it, who are doing the thing that people are saying you should not do. Like, I've seen a lot of women who these actually make me very happy. I used to work in the fitness industry for like over 20 years. And I was always I was never about, in the fitness world, it could, and this was back in like 80s, 90s, it could be a very much like, it was very like, you're supposed to look a certain way. We're looking for perfection, body type, all this and that. And I was never about that. I was always like, you want to feel good in your body. Right. And so now that it's great that they're coming out in social media, these women who are not the stereotype of like skinny model type, they're pretty big and they're out there dancing and they're doing fun things. And like, they're getting all the trolls coming in and giving the hate comments. And they're like, and they use that as ammunition. They'll throw it right back out there. They're not ashamed of it. They don't let those comments bring them down. They're like, this is who I am and I'm proud of it. And so I'm glad to see that starting to happen more, and people having the courage to just be themselves and to lead the way, because that is a leadership thing. That's when I have a term called soul leader. It's like you're leading from your soul. You're that light, you're leading others to do more of the same. And it just, it makes my heart feel so good to see people doing that, because it's hard. It's hard.
And that's why someone, if here's my speech to the audience, if you're listening to this show and you're going, I really don't feel like I'm really living my best life. I'm not feeling like I'm doing everything that I really would like to do, but it's so hard to do that. Call Kim. She can help you. She can walk down the road with you, judgment free, and talk about what you would like to do for yourself. Because we don't get to talk about that very much. And I admit, when I started doing the radio, it was a hugely selfish thing. It affected my family and other people around me in big ways that I didn't see coming until I was already into it. But at that point, it was like it's still. And I remember sitting there talking to my wife, saying, "I love this. I'll do it till the day I die. This is important for me," and stuff. So, and it has nothing to do with Kim. It has nothing to do with me being a shiny object that people can look at and say, "Look at me, look at me." It's because I can help people. I can bring them people like you. That's what's important to me, is to have a great show where I can bring important people who've got a wonderful thing to say and can help people like you can. And that's why I do it.
Well, and I love this story too about the caregiver, the Alzheimer's patient caregiver. Like, you're connecting, you're helping other people connect. And it's just, and you're never going to know how many people you have impacted in these 20 years, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And it all spirals out. And that's kind of what I see, like consciousness. It's like an upward spiral, it just keeps going up and up and up. So yeah, you just don't know, like one little thing you can do, one comment you can say. I mean, we have so much power in our words. I had actually, because I was a people pleaser, right? I had one teacher in high school, geometry, and I really respected her. I really loved that class. I was really good at math. But it was one conversation we had, like the class wasn't there and she was talking to me and she goes, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I'm a sophomore. "What do you want to do when you go to college?" And I said, "I really want to be a writer. I love writing." Like, that's what I felt like I was born to do, was to write. And she said, "Well, writers don't make any money. That's not a very responsible thing to do." And she went into a whole spiel about how women you need to make your own money as a woman. Don't ever depend on a man. Like, she really went down that hole. But I remember thinking like, oh, wow, but I remember her saying it's not responsible to be a writer. They don't make any money. And therefore, and that was the seed that got planted that made sure that I applied to all the colleges as in the engineering department. It wasn't my parents. My parents didn't tell me to do it. No one in my family it was that one comment. And then I came up with this on my own, like, well, I need to come up. She said I need to make my own money. So, I mean, isn't that crazy? That's insane. Like this one conversation and this one comment she made really changed how I thought about myself and what my future could be. So you could either take someone down one rabbit hole, or I could have taken it in a whole nother way, you know, or that conversation, she could have gone on very differently. She could have been like, wow, writing is one of the most important things that you can do to express your opinions and your thoughts and your creativity. Like that is something like you know what I mean? Like it could have gone a whole nother way. So it's amazing how, if you don't stop and consider, wait a minute, that's her story. Is this my story? Like what is going to serve the best and highest good for myself and for others? And I think we kind of forget to do that a lot of times.
Oh, incessantly. We always think that somebody else's opinion is better than our opinion. Maybe not all of us, but I did. For a long time, I always thought that their opinions mattered more than mine did.
Right. Well, you know, and I mean, I know people who they were the opposite, right? Anything a teacher said, forget it. Like I'm going to do the opposite. I don't respect teachers or whatever, or anyone telling me what to do. So it's almost like goes the opposite direction. I'm just going to not even take it in and do something just to prove them wrong. But yeah, I think most of us were raised like you respect your teachers, your elders, your parents, whomever, and they know better than you. That's a lot of times. Like I think I've encountered a lot of people who were told they weren't smart, like they told they were stupid as they were growing up. So you better listen to other people, right? Again, that really messes with your self-doubt. You can't have any if people keep telling you you're stupid, right? So
that's exactly right. By the way, if somebody would like to contact you and to work with you, how do they get that done?
I mean, the best way to do would just go to my website, kimnishida.com. And there's so many different ways to get in contact with me. You can call me, or best thing to do is to sign up for my email list. And then that's the easy way to contact me. Email is great.
And I have really appreciated having you here. And our time is going to run short a little bit, but this will also be on positivetalkradio.net, as well as the interview that's already up on Positive Talk that we did on a week or so ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what did you think of that interview? Did you have fun? I thought we connected well.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, the time just flies when I'm talking to you, Kevin. It's really easy to talk to you and so interesting. I mean, I think this conversation is something I would love to have a lot more with a lot of different people. It's really cool because not everyone wants to have the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, but see, I'm the lucky guy because I get to have you as a coach, and I'm right, and we're on the radio. Yeah. And so there's a little bit of, by the way, for people who don't necessarily believe everything that I say, it's all true. And I don't make any of this stuff up. It just all actually did happen, at least in my memory, the way that I thought. But the stories that we tell ourselves can be so insidious that we listen to them and we then do not achieve or do the things in life that we want to do. And how do you help people get out of that rut that they're in?
It's really just mostly inquiry, looking into, I think the biggest tool we have is curiosity, and curiosity from a more childlike point of view, I think what happens when we start to inquire is we do it to assess blame or to make wrong or to compare or judge. So it's really hard to have curiosity without judgment, especially on ourselves. So that's kind of a good place to start. Just get curious about like, wow, is this story true for me? Is it true even now? I'll share with you really quickly. I had a belief that I couldn't drive. Like I was terrified of driving. I had a fear of driving. I didn't drive. That was part of my identity. I'm someone who will never drive. Until I was 36 years old and I had a moment of just curiosity. I wonder if I could drive. I was riding a bike everywhere. I had a 20-pound bag of dog food, trying to get it on the back of the bike. And it was such a pain in the butt. It kept sliding off of the bungee cords. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I wonder if I could learn to drive. It was just curious. Could I do it? I don't know. And that's what started. That's why I actually now drive. I overcame that fear and can drive.
Who told you in your past that you couldn't drive? Or was it?
I told myself that. For some reason, I was very scared. I think it was at Disneyland, the Autopia cars. I have no idea what it was.
I remember that ride.
There's nothing to be scared of on that ride. Though. It's on a rail. You cannot crash that car. And so, but I think for something was scared me, and I was always very scared to drive. I had paralyzed with fear. And so I just took it upon myself. That's my identity. That's who I am. Just part of who I am.
So what was it like for you when you walked into the DMV to take your driver's test?
I wasn't sure. I wasn't making myself right or wrong. I wasn't like, hey, if this doesn't work out, then I'm no worse off than I was before for 36 years, right? So it was just kind of like, I'm going to do this thing and it's either going to work or it's not. And it was fine. I passed it. It's great. I mean, I still was a year of driving, being very scared, but it wasn't like the fear was instantly gone, but it was something that I did. I shed that story. That wasn't my story anymore. So.
And so would you recommend that somebody, if they're telling a story to themselves, that they test the veracity of that story to see whether it's actually true for them or not?
I always say, just ask yourself, is it true for me now? Is it true for me now? And is it serving me now? Is this story serving me today? And if you feel like it's not serving you, then that's where you kind of just get curious. Well, what would serve me better? What story would I like to have instead? It's always kind of good if you're shedding a story to insert a new one that's more empowering. So it's just this gentle, especially if you've been someone who's hard on yourself, just a gentle series of inquiries. And then you kind of start to see, once you open up to the possibility that maybe this isn't true, you kind of see these things. Well, then I wonder what I could do if I was going to inquire, like for the driving thing. Well, if I was going to try to drive, what would my next step be? It's like, well, maybe I should get a lesson, So I called up a school that specialized in teaching adults who are terrified to drive how to drive, right? So
it's like they have a bumper sticker on the back of their car said, "Caution, terrified driver."
Yeah. You don't want to be near them.
Well, but especially when you're hard on yourselves, does that come from a story that somebody else told you at one time?
Most likely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, it's like if you grew up and someone told you were stupid every day, then you're going to take that on. Right. And so you're going to be hard on yourself. You're going to call yourself stupid. And that just kind of grows deeper and deeper and stronger every day. Right. So yeah, it possibly came from somebody, but again, like the story I told about, the driving thing, like no one told me I was a bad driver or couldn't drive or anything. I just came, when you're a kid, if you're scared of something, we give meaning to things that really don't have a lot of meaning. So that's the thing. We make up stories to make sense of things. That's kind of our nature as humans. We want to understand the world, so we make up stories.
Sometimes those stories can be darn bad for us.
Yeah, they're not serving us. Maybe, and even stories that served us in the past might have done a very good job of serving us in the past and just aren't serving us anymore today. So, but I think we forget to question, hey, that story I made up when I was 3, is that still a story for me when I'm 55, right? It's like, I'm a different person now. Is it still the same for me now? So
yeah, it happened to my mother-in-law. She was adopted. She spent 86 years of her life saying, I'm not good enough. No one loves me because I was adopted. And she never questioned it for her whole life. And it was a waste. It was a waste of her life. We've only got a minute left or so. And I would like, Kim, for you to give us your information again and to tell our audience that's listening today anything that you would like them to know.
Well, thank you for having this conversation. And if you're here listening, thank you for listening to the conversation, because that's when things start to happen, right? When you're open to these conversations. And I think that is, again, where we're going. My website, the best way to contact me is at kimnishida.com. And although it's always hard to spell my last name, right? You can also go to soulconnectioncommunity.com. That's another good way to get in touch with me. or social media is always a good way as well. I would say connect with your heart, connect with your soul. You are here for a reason. And like Kevin said, you just know it in your bones when it's the right thing to do. And just strengthening and doing that questioning to strengthen that soul connection. That's what we're here to do. So.
And I want to thank you for being here. You are a marvelous person. Will you come back and talk to me some more?
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. I would love to come back.
I think I need more therapy. So there. And Benny's sitting over there vigorously nodding his head. Yeah, you do, my friend.
I'm gathering all the therapy as well.
Very nice. Benny, thank you for being here. And Kim, thank you for being here. And by the way, everybody, take care of each other because, each other's all we've got. We'll see you Wednesday at 4. Have a great day, everybody.